of biodiversity, maintaining balance of ecosystem. Okay, recycling and storage of nutrient, combining pollution and stabilizing climate, promoting water resources, farming and protecting soil and maintaining ecosystems, provision of biological resources, provision of medicine and pharmaceutical food for the human population and animals, ornamental plant, wood product, and breed stock and diversity of species, ecosystem and gene, social benefit, recreation and tourism, cultural value and education and research. The role of biodiversity in the following area will help make clear the importance of biodiversity in human life. Biodiversity and food. 80% of human food supply comes from 20 kind of plant, but humans use 40,000 for food, clothing and shelter. Biodiversity provide for variety of food and for the plant and biodiversity biodiversity and human health. The shortage of drinking water is expected to create a major global crisis. Biodiversity also play an important role in drug discovery and medicinal resources. Medicinal from natural account for uses by 80% of the world population. Biodiversity and industry. Biological source provide many industrial materials. This includes fiber, oil, dyes, rubber, water, timber, paper and food. Biodiversity and culture. Biodiversity enhance recreational activity like bird watching, fishing, trekking, etc. It inspire musician and artist. Status of biodiversity in Nepal. के status छ त biodiversity in protected area system in Nepal. Status of ecosystem diversity. The original study to identify and classify the community ecosystem was carried out by Dombriz and his colleagues in late 1960s. Okay, and the classification was based on altitude, climate variation and vegetation type. Altitude, climate variation and vegetation type. Dombriz 1970-1976. The biodiversity profile project BPP 1995, which built upon Dombriz's work and reported 181 ecosystem with 70% 5% vegetation type, is the most widely used categorization of ecosystem and vegetation since in creation. Forest, rangeland, wetland and agro ecosystem are the major group of ecosystems. 8 2020 8 18. Okay, physiographic region ecosystem. Okay, high हिमाल एन्ड हाई माउन्टेन 38%, 38-53-14 12-1 गरी मिडिल माउन्टेन शिवालिक तराई. ओके, 32.2% इकोसिस्टम, 44.9% शिवालिक मिडिल माउन्टेन. शिवालिकमा 11.9%, तराईमा चाहिँ 10.2% र अदरमा एकमा चाहिँ 0.8%. 37वटा फरेस्ट र एकवटा चाहिँ ग्लेसियर. 52वटा फरेस्ट, एकवटा कल्टिभेटेड पोखरामा कल्टिभेटेड छ. 13वटा फरेस्ट एन्ड 1 कल्टिभेटेड दुन. 10वटा फरेस्ट एन्ड 2 कल्टिभेटेड अदर्स. वाटर बडिज फाउन्ड इन अल जोन एक्सेप्ट द शिवालेक तराई. ओके, एनबी साप 2014 देखि 2020. almost 118 ecosystem type. 80 ecosystems are represented in present protected area system in Nepal. BPP 1996. Okay. Status of forest diversity. Stanton 1972 delineates phytogeographic boundary. Stanton 1972 delineate phytogeographic boundary based on climate, vegetation and floristic composition and classified the country forest into 35 types. These types are often categorized into 10 major group. Okay, tropical, subtropical, broadleaf, subtropical, conifer, lower temperate broadleaf, lower temperate mixed broadleaf, upper temperate broadleaf, upper temperate mixed broadleaf, temperate conifer, subalpine and alpine scrub. This categorization has been used as a basis for classifying forest ecosystem since then. Tropical 1000 मिटरसम्म, सोरिया रवस्ता, टर्मिनेलिया, बम्ब्याक्स र एल्बजिया. सबट्रोपिकल 1000 देखि 2000, सीमा वालिसी एन्ड क्यास्टानोपिस इंडिका, पाइनस रक्सबर्गाई. टेम्परेट 2000 देखि 3000, क्यास्टानोपिस, कर्कस, एल्नस, लिथोकार्पस, पैचिफाइला एन्ड रोडोडेन्ड्रम. एन्ड सबअल्पाइन. ओके, सबअल्पाइन 3000 देखि 4000, बेटुला उत्तिलिस, एबिस स्पेक्टाबिलिस, रोडोडेन्ड्रम स्पिसिस. अल्पाइन 4000 भन्दा माथि, जुनिपेरस स्पिसिस, रोडोडेन्ड्रम स्पिसिस. स्ट्याटस अफ रेन्जल्यान्ड इकोसिस्टम. रेन्जल्यान्ड इकोसिस्टम इन नेपाल आर comprised of grassland, pasture and shrubland that cover about 1.7 million hectare or nearly 12% of the total country land. About 79% of the rangeland are located in the high mountain. 79% झन्डै 80% चाहिँ हाई माउन्टेनमा छ एन्ड हाई माउन्टेन एन्ड हाई हिमालमा. 70% मिडल माउन्टेनमा, 70% मिडल माउन्टेन एन्ड the remaining 4% in the शिवालिक एन्ड तराईमा. शिवालिक एन्ड तराईमा 4%, मिडल माउन्टेनमा 70% र 79% चाहिँ हाई माउन्टेन एन्ड हाई हिमालमा. LRMP ल्यान्ड रिसोर्स म्यापिङ प्रोजेक्ट 1986 का अनुसार द कन्ट्री रेन्जल्यान्ड इकोसिस्टम क्यान बी ब्रोडली ग्रुप्ड इन्टु 5 क्याटेगोरी. ओके, एसआई ट्रोपिकलमा एसआई रेन्ज एसआई भने स्याक्रम, स्पोन्टानियम एन्ड इम्पेरिका सिलिन्ड्रिकल. सब ट्रोपिकलमा चाहिँ इभिपिए, युपाटोरियम ओडोनोफोरम, टेरिडियम एक्विलिनुम, उर्टिका पार्विफोलोरा एन्ड आर्टेमेसिया भल्गेरिस. इयुपिए सब ट्रोपिकल. टेम्परेट एन्ड सब अल्पाइनमा चाहिँ पिए, सब अल्पाइनमा पिए रहेछ. पिप्टान्थस नेपालेन्सिस एन्ड एनाफालिस स्पिसिस. एनाफालिस, पाइन किनेफालिस. ओके, सब अल्पाइनमा पाइन किनेफालिस. अल्पाइनमा एनसी. ओके, नाइमोरहेडस बाइली, नाइमोरहेडस बाइली एन्ड क्याप्रिकर्निस सुमाट्रानिस. ओके, बाइली सुमाट्रानिस. ओके, वेटल्यान्ड इकोसिस्टम. वेटल्यान्ड इकोसिस्टम अफ नेपाल fall into 2 broad category, natural and man-made. Comprise of lake and pond, river, floodplain, swamp and marsh. Natural भयो. Man-made मा चाहिँ include water reservoirs, pond and deep water paddy field and nearly half 45 of the wetland are in high Himal. This is due mainly to the large number of glacier and glacial lake in the Himalayan region. 10 of the country wetland are listed as Ramsar site. Detail in unit 3, wetland biodiversity, estimated coverage of different type of wetland and river, lake and reservoir pond. River area हेक्टरमा स्क्वायरमा चाहिँ 3950 स्क्वायर किलोमिटर रिभरको एरिया. 48.2% चाहिँ छ. लेकको चाहिँ 50 km स्क्वायर 0.6%. रिजर्भोयर 15 km स्क्वायर 0.2 एन्ड पोन्ड चाहिँ 27.77 km स्क्वायर 0.9%. ओके. त्यसपछि मेरिन मेरिन मार्जिनल स्वाम्प चाहिँ 125 km स्क्वायर 1.5%. इरिगेटेड पोन्ड प्याडी फिल्ड चाहिँ 3980 km स्क्वायर एन्ड 48.6%. टोटल चाहिँ 8192.77 km स्क्वायर चाहिँ 8192.77 km स्क्वायर चाहिँ छ है त. अब स्ट्याटस अफ एग्रो इकोसिस्टम डाइभर्सिटी. क्रप, लाइभस्टक एन्ड फरेस्ट आर द मेन. क्रप, लाइभस्टक एन्ड फरेस्ट are the main component of Nepal's farming systems. Forest is integral component of the systems. Home garden in tropical, subtropical, temperate and alpine are diverse. Diversity of horticulture system is an important component of the country agroecosystem, which can be broadly classified into 3 types. के त tropical and subtropical, subtropical and temperate, tropical, subtropical, temperate र temperate र alpine. यसको यो है त. त्यसपछि स्ट्याटस अफ स्पिसिस डाइभर्सिटी. अब एन्जियोस्पर्म 6973 2014 मा छ भन्दाखेरि 6973 290 इन्डेमिक है त. 6973 एन्जियोस्पर्म. जिम्नोस्पर्म 14 मा 26 थियो भनेपछि पछि 41 वटा भएछ. टेरिडोफाइट 534 2014 मा र 2018 मा 580. अब र ब्राइफाइट 1150 2014 मा र 1213 2018 मा 13 इन्डेमिक स्पिसिस हैन. त्यसपछि लिचेन 465 14 मा 792 18 मा 55 इन्डेमिक लिचेन्स. एन्ड ओलियन शर्मा 2013 मा अनुसार फङ्गी 1822 14 मा भनेपछि 2467 18 मा 131 इन्डेमिक. एन्ड अल्गी 1001 र 1001 29 वटा चाहिँ इन्डेमिक अल्गीहरू रहेछन्. प्रधानले 2013 मा गरेको टोटल चाहिँ 1367 वटा चाहिँ स्ट्याटस अफ स्पिसिस डाइभर्सिटी छन्. ओके. अब फाउना 1367 वटा. अब फाउना म्यामल्स 208 पछि 212. एमिन अटल 218. बर्ड 867 915 18 मा 915 है त 18 मा बर्ड. रेप्टाइल्स 123. एम्फिबियन 117. फिसेस 230 वटा थिए 14 मा भने चाहिँ 18 मा 232 वटा. गुरुङ 2016 कोले. बटरफ्लाई 651 वटा थिए भनेपछि 664 वटा बटरफ्लाई साइटेड इन थापा 2015. स्पाइडर 175 वटा थियो भने 175 वटै छ. इसी मोड एन्ड MOEST 2007 ले है त. इन्डेमिजम. नेपाल हैज 284 वटा इन्डेमिजम फ्लोरिङ प्लान्ट स्पिसिस एन्ड 184 वटा इन्डेमिक फ्लोरिङ प्लान्ट एन्ड 160 वटा इन्डेमिक एनिमल स्पिसिस इन्क्लुडिङ 1 mammals, 1 bird and 24 herpeto fauna. 1 mammals, 1 bird and 1 herpeto fauna species 24 वटा है त herpeto fauna. ग्लोबल बायोडाइभर्सिटी शेयर. नेपाल harbored approximately 1.3% of global biodiversity, positioning in 49th worldwide in terms of species richness, ecosystem diversity. The country The country encompasses 6 biomes, 35 forest type and 118 ecosystem range from tropical lowland to alpine zone and जिमा छ status of ecosystem habitat diversity thematic area र category protected area नेसनल पार्क 12 वाइल्ड लाइफ 1 हन्टिङ 1 कन्जर्भेसन एरिया छ र बफर जोन 13 डिएनपीडब्ल्युसी 2018 अनुसार प्रोटेक्टेड एरिया कभरेज 23.39% एन्ड रामसार साइट 10 वटा फरेस्ट भेजिटेसन 55 वटा एन्ड मे अटल 2015 को 55 वटा फरेस्ट एन्ड भेजिटेसन अनि फरेस्ट एरिया 46.08 एफआरटीसी 2024 को अनुसार इम्पोर्टेन्ट बर्ड एरिया 42 वटा बर्ड लाइफ इन्टरनेसनल 2024 अनुसार एन्ड बर्ड सेन्चुरी घोडाघोडी र जगदीश घोडाघोडी जगदीश चाहिँ घोडाघोडी 2078 1227 र जगदीश 2079 332 मा इम्पोर्टेन्ट बर्ड एरिया विभिन्न इम्पोर्टेन्ट बर्ड एरिया र अन्न अपी बाप्ची बारेकोट धरान लिली भ्याली त्रियुगा वाटर रामपुर भ्याली गरी विभिन्न यिनी सब एरिया बर्ड एरियाहरू 42 वटा त्रियुगा वाटर सेट च्यालेन्ज अपर्चुनिटी एन्ड थ्रेट फर कन्जर्भेसन अफ बायोडाइभर्सिटी इन नेपाल च्यालेन्ज अन बायोलोजिकल बायोडाइभर्सिटी कन्जर्भेसन इन नेपाल एच चिपु भन्ने चाहिँ च्यालेन्ज हो है त सिएचआइपियु च्यालेन्ज ह्याबिटाट डिस्ट्रक्सन ह्याबिटाट लस एन्ड फ्रेगमेन्ट ह्याबिटाट डिस्ट्रक्सन ओके rapid urbanization deforestation and agricultural expansion pose significant change to biodiversity conservation in Nepal habitat loss and fragmentation rapid urbanization deforestation and land conservation for agriculture are leading to the loss and fragmentation of critical habitat affecting biodiversity climate change increasing temperature alternate precipitation pattern and extreme weather event threatened the delicate ecosystem and species in the country. Illegal wild trade. Nepal serves as a transit route for the illegal trade of wildlife and other parts, posing a significant challenge to conservation effort. Poverty and human activity. High priority rate and unsuitable human activities such as poaching, overgrazing and unregulated tourism put pressure on natural resource and biodiversity and unsustainable land use practice unsustainable farming method overgrazing and unregulated tourism activity can degrade ecosystem degraded habitat and disturb ecological process opportunities on biodiversity conservation in Nepal PCET है त opportunity on biodiversity conservation in Nepal protected area community based conservation ecotourism and traditional knowledge and practice Nepal has established a network of protected area including national park and conservation area providing opportunity for biodiversity conservation and ecosystem management community based conservation in engaging local community in conservation effect has so positive result in Nepal fostering a sense of ownership and responsibility among the local peoples ecotourism Nepal rich biodiversity and since landscape for offers significant opportunity for sustainable ecosystem which can contribute to conservation effort while providing economic benefit to local environment community okay and traditional knowledge and practice integrating traditional knowledge and practice of indigenous community into conservation strategy can help preserve biodiversity and ecosystem. Threatened biodiversity conservation in Nepal, IPL. Okay, invasive pollution and habitat destruction, lack of awareness, limited resources and capability, political instability. Okay, invasive species, threat on biodiversity conservation in Nepal. Invasive species, the introduction of non-native species can disrupt to native ecosystem and threaten the survival of indigenous flora and fauna in Nepal. Pollution and habitat destruction, industrial pollution, agricultural rules, agricultural runoff, and improper waste disposal contaminates water bodies, degraded soil quality, and threatened biodiversity. Lack of awareness and capability, insufficient public awareness about the importance of biodiversity conservation and limited capacity of effective conservation strategy hinder effect in Nepal. And limited resource and capacity, limited financial resources, technical expertise, and capacity at the institutional and community level pose challenge to effective biodiversity conservation. Political instability and lack of consistent policies and enforcement mechanism can undermine biodiversity conservation initiatives. Approaches for biodiversity conservation in Nepal. Government of Nepal has initiated both in situ and ex situ conservation approach established of protected area in an example of in situ conservation, while establishment of conservation breeding center are an example of ex situ conservation. Okay, biodiversity conservation approach: natural habitat in situ, artificial habitat ex situ. Natural protected area, zoo, breeding center, botanical garden, and seed bank is the ex situ conservation. In situ conservation is the on-site conservation or the conservation of genetic resources in natural pollution of plant population of plant or animal species such as forest, genetic resources in natural population of tree species. Example of in situ conservation in national park, strict reserve, wildlife area, natural reserve, protected seascapes conservation area, buffer zone. Okay, it is an process of protecting an endangered plant and animal species in its natural habitat, either by protecting or by defending the species from predator. Okay, and second, the conservation of ecosystem and natural habitat and the maintenance and recovery of variables, population of species in their natural surrounding, and in the case of domesticated or cultivated species in the surrounding where they have developed their distinctive properties. CBD 1992. In situ conservation is one of the two basis conservation strategy alongside ex situ conservation. Articles 8 of the Convention on Biological Diversity, Article 8, ex situ conservation. Species in situ conservation is the primary conservation strategy and status that ex situ conservation should play a supporting role to reach conservation target. In situ conservation aim to enable biodiversity to maintain itself within the context of the ecosystem in which it is found. In situ management approach can either be targeted at population of selected species center, or whole ecosystem based. Okay, and traditionally protected area have been seen as a cornerstone of the in situ conservation approach that are more adaptable to individual situation and applicable beyond protected area are being increasingly applied. In situ conservation in Nepal has a long history since the establishment of Mahindra Mirga Kunja. Okay, 1961. Currently, Nepal 20% area चाहिँ केयर बफर जोन गरी इज कभरिङ 80% अफ आउट अफ 118 इकोसिस्टम अफ द कन्ट्री. Similarly, the endangered species such as Bengal tiger, Panthera tigris, greater one horned rhinoceros, Rhinoceros unicornis, aesthetic elephant, Elephantus maximus, Bengal floric and Hovarus bengalensis, Gharial Gabrielis gangeticus are protected inside lowland protected area of Nepal. And ex situ conservation. Ex situ conservation is the preservation of preservation of component of biological diversity outside their natural habitat. This involves conservation of genetic resources as well as wild and cultivated species and draw on a diverse body of techniques and facilities. Some of these include green bank, seed bank, breeding center zone. And example of ex situ conservation: zoo, botanical garden, captive breeding, seed storage and orchid. In vitro, creating artificial environment. Vitro भने चाहिँ creating artificial environment. Vitro, plant tissue and microbial cultural collection. Captive breeding of animal and artificial propagation of plant, which possible reintroduction into the wild. And collecting live organism, living organism for zoo, aquarium, aquaria and botanic garden for research and public awareness. And ex situ offsite conservation is a set of conservation technique involve the transfer of a targeted species away from its native habitat. It is one of two basic conservation strategy alongside in situ conservation. Ex situ technique includes seed storage, captive breeding and DNA storage. The main purpose of ex situ conservation are the rescue and preservation of threatened genetic material and the breeding of species for reintroduction in case where a species continue survival in its natural habitat is threatened. Ex situ conservation from the basis of Articles 9. Ex situ Articles 9, the conservation on biological diversity. In situ 8, ex situ 9, which highlight it should be implemented as a complementary and not as an alternatives. Okay, approach to in situ conservation. Approach to ex situ conservation. Ex situ measures should preferentially be put into practice in the country of species origin. Some example of ex situ conservation in Nepal are Central Zoo, Jaulakhel, Lalitpur. Conserve 127 wild species including threatened species, National Botanical Garden, Godavari, Lalitpur. Conserve more than 1000 plant species. Elephant Breeding Center, breeding aesthetic elephant in Chiton National Park and Bardia National Park. And vulture breeding center, breeding 2 vulture species, white rumped vulture and slender bill vulture in Chiton National Park, white rust cylinder. And Gharial breeding center, breeding Gharial in Chiton National Park and Bardia National Park. Rhino translocation program from Chiton National Park to Bardia National Chiton to Bardia. And Suklafata Orna translocation program from Kosi Topubata Chiton. And black buck translocation from Khairapur to Suklafata. Okay, Khairapur to Suklafata National Park. Park people conflict and its impact on conservation. Park people conflict refer to a situation where there is an disagreement tension or clash, disagreement, tension or clash between different group or individual within a park and natural recreational area. This conflict can arise due to various factors such as differing interest, competing needs, limited resources, or different interpretation of park rules and regulation. It can involve conflict between park visitor, conflict between park visitor and park management, or conflict between different user groups within the park. This conflict can have a significant impact on conservation effort in several ways. And WSRID भने park people conflict and its impact on conservation. Habitat destruction, WS RID habitat destruction. Conflict between different user group may result in habitat disturbance or destruction. For example, off-trail hiking, unauthorized camping, or excessive noise can disturb wildlife habitat and negatively impact sensitive ecosystems. Wildlife disturbance, conflict between wildlife enthusiasts and other park visitor can lead to the disturbance of wildlife, approaching animal too closely, making loud noise, or engaging in activity that disturb their natural behaviors can have adverse effect on wildlife population and their ability to thrive. Resource depletion, competing interest and limited resources in a park can lead to conflict over resource use. Overfishing, excessive plant harvesting, or unsustainable hunting practice can deplete natural resources, impacting the balance and health of the ecosystem. Invasive species spread, disagreement regarding the introduction of or control of invasive species can contribute to conflict. If not properly managed, invasive species can outcompete native species, disrupt natural ecological process, and harm biodiversity. Damage to park infrastructure, conflict between park visitor can result in vandalism then or damage to park infrastructure and facilities. Such action can divert valuable resources away from conservation effect, requiring repair and maintenance. Habitat management, the art and science of creating, maintaining and enhancing condition on landscape to meet specific objective for population of wildlife. The stability, increase or decline of wildlife species or population depends directly on the quality and extent of available habitat. Wildlife management is the art and science of making decision and taking action to manipulate wildlife to achieve specific human objective. Basic consideration of habitat management. IME okay IME ठीक छ. IME habitat inventory, what the habitat consists, evaluation, how good is the habitat for study, animals or conservation objectives, monitoring, habitat लाई मोनिटर गर्नु पर्यो, is the habitat improving or deteriorating, food, educate of food supply proper kind available is in sufficient quality at each season and stage of the animals. Water, it is crucial available is open water, dew drop or at succulent plant parts. Some are water dependent. Cover, essential factor scaps cover, reproductive cover, roost scap, scap essential factor cover, reproductive cover, roasting cover, ambush cover for performing other behavioral activity. Objective of habitat को objective क्या था? To maintain and where necessary restore the demographic indicators of growth relating to population of all endangered, endemic or rare vulnerable species of plant and animal species. To maintain and where necessary restore the catchment capability or habitat. To establish mechanism and create opportunity for enhancing management capacity and knowledge in wildlife science. Institutional major challenge of management हुम्ला मेजर च्यालेन्ज भने हुम्ला रहेछ है त. ह्याबिटाट रिलेटेड फ्रेगमेन्टेसन, ह्याबिटाट रिलेटेड च्यालेन्जहरू के हुन्? फ्रेगमेन्टेसन, डिग्रेडेसन, फरेस्ट फायर र ग्राजिङ एन्ड ट्यापी. ठिक छ. अब म्यानेजमेन्ट रिलेटेडमा पोइसिङ, म्यान एनिमल कन्फ्लिक्ट, इन्क्लेभ सेटलमेन्ट, साइडेड टुरिज्म and legal aspect, weakness flaw in Wildlife Protection Act, offense balance bailable, non-cognizable disposal of size wildlife stocks, use of firearms, delayed justice, lack of knowledge on other act. Okay, administrative infrastructure constraint, vacancy of frontline staffs, lack of coordination with others, lack of trained staffs, lack of physical fitness, motivation level amongst staffs. Okay, human wildlife conflict. Human wildlife conflict is defined as any interaction between human and wildlife that result in negative impact, that is on social, economic life, on the conservation of wild population or on the environment. Human wildlife conflict arise primarily because of competition between human and wildlife for shared limited resources. It affects both wild animal and human beings, and also in economy. Peoples lose their crops, livestock, property, and sometimes even their lives. Conflict between people and wildlife have been widely recognized as one of the most challenging issues for wildlife conservation worldwide. Cause of human wildlife conflict. Cause of human wildlife conflict. Primary cause of human wildlife conflict is competition with people for space and resources. Human wildlife conflict arise mainly because of the loss, degradation, and fragmentation of habitat shrinkage through human activities such as logging, encroachment, animal husbandry, agricultural expansion and development project, limited awareness in local peoples, improper habitat management inside the protected area, irrational compensation provision are other reason for increased conflict between human and wildlife. Okay, driver of forest. Driver के हुन् भन्दाखेरि growing interest of tourism and access to reserve, increase number of livestock, habitat loss, degradation, climatic factor and fire, land use transformation, attitude and perception, and abundance and distribution of wild prey, human population growth, okay, are the driver force. Human wildlife conflict impact conservation. Threat to wildlife. Human wildlife conflict often lead to the injury of death of wildlife. Animal may be killed intentionally in retaliation. Intentionally in retaliation for damage caused to crops, livestock, or human lives. This persecution direct persecution can have serve consequence for endangered or vulnerable species, further threatening their survival and disrupting ecological balance. Habitat fragmentation. To mitigate conflict, humans may engage in habitat modification such as clearing forest or erecting barrier. This action can fragment wildlife habitat, isolating population and reducing their access to food, water, and breeding ground. Fragmentation impact the movement and gene flow of species, increasing their vulnerability to extinction. Disruption of natural behaviors. Wildlife may alter their natural behaviors pattern in response to human presence or to avoid conflict. This can lead to reduced foraging, change in mitigation route, or avoidance of specific area. Such behavioral shift can negatively impact reproductive success and species interaction and overall ecosystem dynamics. Negative attitude and perception. Frequent encounter with conflict situation can foster negative attitude towards wildlife among affected communities. This may lead to increased animosity, resulting in the targeting or disregards of conservation efforts. Negative perception of wildlife can hinder local support for conservation initiative and reduce cooperation with conservation organizations. Economic losses. Human wildlife conflict can cause significant economic losses for communities. Crop raiding, livestock production, and damage to infrastructure result in financial burden for farmers and local communities. This economic implication can create hostility towards wildlife and undermine conservation effort by prioritizing short-term economic gain over long-term sustainability. Conservation priorities. Human wildlife conflict can drive resource and alternation away from broader conservation priority. Conservation organization and governmental agencies may need to allocate resources to conflict mitigation, including compensation program, construction of fence, or implementation of deterrent measure. This shift in focus may result in limited resources being available for other conservation activities such as habitat protection, anti-poaching effect, or public awareness campaign. Conflict management effort. Okay, physical barrier to prevent the animal movement into the human settlement. Electrical fencing has been reported one of the most effective preventive measure for saving the farmer crops, property, and life around the corridor and protected area from herd of wildlife elephant. Proper management of its habitats. Park people conflict buffer zone concept, provision of 30 to 50% of our park income to the local development. The formulation of the wildlife compensation directives 2069, increase compensation amount human casualty 10 देखि 1 लाख रुपैयाँ, लाइभ स्टक ड्यामेज 10 देखि यो चाहिँ सरी यो चाहिँ अहिले चाहिँ छैन। एन्ड लाइभ स्टक ड्यामेज 10 देखि 30,000 र क्रप ड्यामेज चाहिँ 10,000 भन्ने छ। ह्यान्डिङ ओभर बफर जोन कम्युनिटी फरेस्ट टु बफर जोन community and supporting financial and technically to buffer zone community development work, maintaining rescue fund in each buffer zone user community operational plan, conducting conservation oriented program and different level of society, initializing landscape level management, tal, sal, chal and kesal, establishment of community based conflict reduction team, formulating community based anti poaching unit, formulating district level wildlife crime control bureau 28 वटा डिस्ट्रिक्टमा रहेछ। एन्ड मिटिगेसन स्ट्राटेजी CBNRM स्केम, incentives program, insurance compensation program, better sharing of income revenue, better sharing of income revenue, wildlife translocation and regulated harvest. Okay, then you can see the different type of population of some species. We can see wildlife 498, वाइल्ड वाटर बफेलो 498, अनि ब्ल्याक बक 375। कहाँ कहाँ त ब्ल्याक बक कृष्ण सारमा र शुक्लाफाटामा, 166 कृष्ण सारमा, 209 शुक्लाफाटामा। एन्ड ब्लू सिप फ्युडोनिस मायुर धोरपाटनमा 1290, सबै चाहिँ 2903 वटा र कञ्चनजङ्घामा 1613 वटा। त्यसपछि गरे गौर चितवन र पर्सामा गौर पाउँछ 552 वटा, 288 वटा चितवन, 164 वटा पर्सा। राइनो 752, चितवनमा 694, बर्दियामा 38, शुक्लाफाटामा 17, पर्सामा 3। त्यसपछि स्वामडेर चाहिँ 2407, शुक्लाफाटामा 2313, बर्दियामा 94। एन्ड टाइगर 355, चितवनमा 128, बर्दियामा 125, बाँकेमा 25, पर्सामा 41 र शुक्लाफाटामा 36। एन्ड स्नो लियोपार्ड चाहिँ 301 देखि 400, 301 देखि 400 वटा छन् हाई माउन्टेन प्रोटेक्टेड एरियामा। अनि घरियाल चाहिँ नारायणीमा 84, राप्तीमा 82 र बबईमा 31 र कर्णालीमा 1 गरी 2016 को डाटा अनुसार 198 वटा। एन्ड रेड पान्डा चाहिँ 313 देखि 582 हैन 2011 को बुक अनुसार जनवरीको। इलिफेन्ट वाइल्डमा 107 देखि 145 र डोमेस्टिक 153। ओके, ऱ्यापिड फायर फर्स्ट नेशनल पार्क येलोस्टोन नेशनल पार्क USA 1872, the percentage of revenue to be plugged back into community development by protected area is 30-50%. Species not definitely located in the wildlife during the past 50 years extinction. And taxa is danger of extinction, endanger. Taxa likely to move into endanger category in the near future, vulnerable. Taxa will get a small world population rare. Tags are known to be endangered, vulnerable, or rare, but not information to say in which of three lies threatened. Critically endangered, 50% probability of extinction in 5 years. Endangered, 20% probability of extinction in 20 years. Vulnerable, 10% probability of extinction in 100 years. And NPWC Act, which came into 1973, has 34 sections. Largest snakes of Nepal is rock python, Python molurus. Two types of pangolin, Monis pentadactyla China र Monis crassicordata Indian. अनि gestation period of the member of cat family is 90 देखि 110 day. The family of cat is called Felida. The largest antelopes found in Nepal is Bosilophus tragocamelus. Bosilophus tragocamelus, nilgai. Okay, largest antelopes, nilgai. Largest of all of living sheep is 9. Okay, obese amen, largest living sheep 9. The gestation period of the rhino 60 to 18. The member of the dog family is Digitigrastis. Carnivores face food deficit quantitatively. Carnivore quantitatively face food deficit. Herbivore face deficit qualitatively. Okay, त्यसपछि इलिफेन्ट ब्रिडिङ सेन्टर 1986 मा, घडियाल ब्रिडिङ सेन्टर 1978 मा, एन्ड भल्चर ब्रिडिङ सेन्टर कसरा इनसाइड द चितवन नेसनल पार्क 2008 मा. ग्लोबल भल्चर स्पिसिस 16 वटा भल्चर, नेपालमा 9 वटा, फाउन्ड इन साउथ एसियामा चाहिँ 9 वटा. All are found in Nepal. 6 species are residential to Nepal. 6 वटा चाहिँ रेसिडेन्टल नै हुन् नेपालका गिद्धहरू टु नेपाल, एन्ड 3 आर माइग्रेटरी, 3 वटा माइग्रेटरी. नम्बर अफ टाइप अफ हन्टिङ लाइसेन्स द्याट क्यान बी इस्यु लिगल्ली इन नेपाल इज 4 वटा लाइसेन्सहरू. वर्ल्ड लार्जेस्ट कार्निभोर इन नर्थ पोलार बियर, विश्वको सबैभन्दा कार्निभोर ठुलो नर्थ पोलार बेयर. द लार्जेस्ट टाइगर इज साइबेरियन टाइगर. Reptiles are 3 chambers, but crocodile is most advanced reptiles and have 4 chamber. Okay, reptiles सँग 3 chamber, crocodile सँग 4 chamber. Perisodactyla odd toy ungulate, Perisodactyla odd toed ungulate हो, is a rhino, donkey and horse. र Artiodactyla even toy ungulate. बोस गौरस, बोस ग्रान्युस, याक बुबालस बुबाली. शिवपुरी नागार्जुन नेसनल पार्क. ओके, शिवपुरी नागार्जुन नेसनल पार्क इज द लेटेस्ट पार्क टु बी डिक्लेयर्ड 2000 अप्रिल 2015 मा विथ एन एरिया 118.61 हो, तर अहिले चाहिँ छायानाथ भइसक्यो 2082 मा है त. पार्क पिपुल प्रोग्राम PPP funded by UNDP and implemented through DNPWC between 1994 and 2001. In Nepal, conservation on biological diversity signed in 12 July 1992. Articles 8 मा in situ, 9 मा ex situ. National Park and Wildlife Reserve Act 1973, 5 amendment. फर्स्ट 31, 39, 46, 52. ओके, एन्ड 4 मा बफर जोन कन्सेप्ट आएको. 5 मा चाहिँ 2074 मा ल्यान्डस्केप कन्जर्भेसन. 5 मा चाहिँ ल्यान्डस्केप कन्जर्भेसन है त. अ टोटल अफ 894 species has been recorded for so far including nearly 600 breeding species and 42 ग्लोबल्ली थ्रेटेड स्पिसिस। टोटल चाहिँ 894वटा चाहिँ रेकर्डेड भएको छ। त्यसमध्ये चाहिँ इन्क्लुडिङ नियरली 600 चाहिँ ब्रिडिङ स्पिसिस एन्ड 42 चाहिँ ग्लोबल्ली थ्रेटेड स्पिसिसहरू छन्। त्यसपछि गएर हाम्रो नेपाल पोजेस द हाई नम्बर अफ 6 बायोम्स। नेपालमा 6वटा बायोम छ। दिज आर द युरासियन हाई मोन्टे साइनो हिमालयन टेम्परेचर फरेस्ट, साइनो हिमालयन सबट्रोपिकल फरेस्ट, इन्डो चाइनिज ट्रपिकल मोइस्ट फरेस्ट, इन्डो मलायन ट्रपिकल ड्राई जोन एन्ड इन्डो ग्याङ्गेटिक प्लेन